I bought into Willow Harbor Estates, picturing sunset sails, neighborly potlucks, maybe a borrowed cup of sugar or two. Instead, sunrise, 3.5 days later, I find the HOA's head honcho parked on my grass at 7 a.m., face the color of an overcooked lobster, Rolex flashing SOS, shouting that my sailboat is an ecological menace and must vanish before lunchtime. Fast forward 6 months and that same brass-buttoned board is commuting by paddle like they're in a Masters Division regatta, courtesy of yours truly. This saga begins with one stubborn boat and ends with an HOA cardio program no Peloton could match. So tell me, what's the pettiest flex your HOA ever pulled? Drop it below, because once you hear mine, your nightmare's going to feel like a friendly nuisance. My first thought is that I've misplaced a decimal in the bylaws. My second is that Trent has mistaken authority for ownership of the planet. By lunch, the pastel citations multiply faster than rabbits in spring. Unauthorized mooring fee, non-conforming deck stain, excessive chime noise, a wind chime the previous owner left behind, apparently now classified as a sonic weapon. Each slip sports Trent's flamboyant autograph, a swooping flourish so smug it needs its own zip code. I wander the cul-de-sac for perspective and notice a curious pattern. Every dock flaunting a re-elect Trent placard hosts a permanently parked boat, no citations in sight, while newcomers like me are tagged in fluorescent shame. The contrast screams louder than a 4th of July finale. This isn't rule enforcement, it's social sorting with paper shivs. My engineer brain calibrates instantly. Document everything. I snap photos of docks, timestamps, and most importantly, Trent's own speedboat. An 80-grand fiberglass ego trip, lounging at his slip violation-free. In that moment, the neighborhood's veneer of civility peels back to reveal a fiefdom run on favoritism, and nothing in my aerospace resume has prepared me for HOA feudalism. Trent returns the next sunrise, punctual as an IRS audit, reciting subsections like a televangelist quoting scripture. He insists the bylaws will be revised Monday, already has the votes, and suggests I avoid embarrassment by pre-compliance. I volley back the existing guidelines, page, paragraph, comma placement, while balancing my coffee like a peace offering. He hates that. His cheeks deepen from pink to cabernet, and he hisses, "Emergency authority." Watching him stomp off, I notice his pricey watch is 15 minutes slow, proving that even time rebels against tyranny. Between the dock and his BMW, I decide this isn't about a boat anymore. This is about a man who thinks power is measured in pastel paper and how many neighbors he can cow before breakfast. I've been designing stealth hardware for 2 decades. I figure I can design a neighborhood rebellion before the next HOA newsletter hits the mailbox. Monday night's board meeting feels like a corporate retreat for control enthusiasts. Cedar-paneled clubhouse, leather chairs arranged in obedient rows, projector humming with a Comic Sans deck titled "Preserving Our Jewel." Trent parades stock photos of dilapidated marinas nowhere near our zip code, fear-mongering like a late-night infomercial. When he calls for a vote, 5 hands rise in choreographed unison as if they've practiced in front of a mirror. On one hand, Dr. Olivia Brooks, pediatrician and resident heretic, stays grounded. She mentions procedural concerns about the 14-day notice rule, but Trent bulldozes her with parliamentary gobbledygook. During homeowner comments, I stroll to the mic, thank the board for their vivid demonstration of selective enforcement, then unveil 12 time-stamped photos of board member boats parked in permanent bliss. Gasps pop like bubble wrap. Trent's grin freezes into dental art. He promises swift action against misinformation and adjourns quicker than you can say conflict of interest. Outside, Olivia confides that board perks, fee waivers, expedited remodel approvals were dangled like carrot sticks for compliant votes. My smile is involuntary. The hypocrisy is so thick it needs its own diet plan. Sleep and I file for separation that night, so I pour espresso and dive into county archives. Around 3 a.m. I hit pay dirt, a 1975 floodplain plat marking Willow Harbor Lake as city property, public, not private. Translation, Trent's private kingdom floats on municipal water. The document feels like a cheat code in a rigged arcade. At dawn, I knock on neighbor Delia Harper's door, map in hand. She pours coffee, scans the plat, and lets out a laugh that sounds like justice clearing its throat. "Every subdivision's a poker table," she says, tapping the paper. "And kid, you just drew the ace. By breakfast, we've drafted a dossier thicker than Trent's ego. Photographs, statutes, homeowner affidavits, all ready for the next board showdown." As the sun climbs over that mercury-silver lake, I finally grasp the situation. I didn't just buy a house. I accidentally signed up for HOA warfare, but armed with a public lake plat, a rogue pediatrician, and an octogenarian ally with more backbone than most city councils, I'm about to make King Trent trade his Rolex for a paddle. And trust me, the man has terrible form. Delia Harper first appeared on my porch wielding a lattice-topped blueberry pie the size of a manhole cover and a smile that implied she'd already Googled the square footage of my soul. While I sliced us generous wedges, she inspected my violation stack, pastel-colored carrier pigeons of doom, swooping in daily with fresh accusations. "Funny," she said, dabbing crumbs like a surgeon. "Trent never sends those birds to his buddies." Then she produced her pièce de résistance, a brittle 1975 floodplain plat, signed and sealed by the city, declaring Willow Harbor Lake municipal property. The paper smelled faintly of basements and quiet rebellion. I stared at the map, at Delia's expectant grin, and felt the ground shift. If the lake was public, Trent's mooring crusade was as hollow as a chocolate Easter bunny. She patted my hand, eyes twinkling. "City Hall forgets things, dear. I don't. I spent that night scanning the plat, backing it up 3 ways and wondering what else the HOA hoped we'd misplace. Stay tuned, because a single forgotten map is about to redraw the battlefield." Fueled by berry pie and indignation, I opened a laptop and dove into public records like a raccoon in a picnic basket. County tax rolls, permit logs, campaign donations. If it was digitized, I downloaded it. Patterns surfaced fast. Households without Langford yard signs got dinged for grass length, unauthorized gnomes, even non-harmonious porch lighting, while Trent's inner circle glided violation-free. I started photographing every notice and plotting them on a spreadsheet. The resulting heat map looked less like random enforcement and more like a high school clique diagram. My engineer brain purred. Data never lies, but it sure does gossip. Still, patterns need more than screenshots. They need context, motive, maybe a money trail. Delia agreed and slipped me the name of her city clerk cousin who owed her 3 favors and half a pie. I figured if pastel pigeons could fly, freedom of information requests could soar higher. Keep watching, because the numbers are about to sing. And the chorus won't be flattering. The HOA meeting arrived dressed as a pep rally for paranoia. Cedar walls, free coffee, seats arranged so Trent supporters formed an obedient phalanx up front. He fired up a projector and launched a Comic Sans slideshow titled Blight Prevention Initiative, each slide a disaster postcard from places that definitely weren't Willow Harbor. Rusted docks, derelict barges, a lone duck wrapped in 6-pack plastic. Complete with the Shutterstock watermark still blinking like a lie detector. Trent warned that my rogue sailboat was the first domino. When he called for a vote, 5 board hands shot up in choreographed unison. Only Dr. Olivia Brooks kept hers down, citing the 14-day notice rule. Trent dismissed her concern with parliamentary mumbo-jumbo, banged his gavel, and smiled like a blackjack dealer flipping a house win. The audience shuffled out, most unaware they'd just watched democracy get speedrun. I lingered, snapped a photo of the yes-voting lineup, and wondered how many violations it took to silence one dissenting voice. Stick around, because Olivia's lone no will echo louder than Trent ever expected. Outside, Delia hobbled over, perfume of library dust and victory on her shawl. "You see the vendor list? They flashed for half a second," she whispered. "Harbor Shore Services, LLC, Lake Maintenance." I'd barely registered the slide, but she recited the line item from memory, savant style. "Company registered to Carson Langford, Trent's cousin," she added, eyes gleaming. The implication hit like cold water. Trent wasn't just policing boats, he was cashing checks for maintenance on water he didn't own. Delia pressed a yellow sticky note into my palm. State business registry number circled in red. Start there. Follow the invoices. Patterns love repeating. I watched her shuffle away, Kane tapping a Morse code none of us deserved to ignore. With one cousin on the LLC and another slide buried in a fear deck, the money trail suddenly smelled less like algae and more like garden variety grift. Next up, bank records, contractor permits, and maybe a polite chat with Trent's least favored accountant. Don't drift off now. This current runs deeper than the lake. I spent the next 48 hours mining the state corporation portal, FOIA forms humming out of my printer like lottery tickets. Turns out Harbor Shore Services received quarterly aquatic upkeep payments that dwarfed the city's entire park's budget. Yet Google Maps showed no company sign, no trucks, just a postbox and box beside a tanning salon. Meanwhile, Trent's pet speedboat sipped gas at his dock with 0 environmental inspections. The hypocrisy was thick enough to butter toast. I crafted a timeline, payments, votes, violations, color-coded for maximum sting, and shared it with Olivia, who replied, "This could trigger a forensic audit." The phrase felt like music. As I hit send, another pastel pigeon thudded against my door, this one warning of excessive reflection from boat hull. Reflection, as in the sun bouncing off paint. The irony nearly broke the sound barrier. I photographed it, added it to the heat map, and grinned. The brighter Trent tried to shine his authority, the clearer his shadows appeared. Trust me, those shadows are about to see daylight. Petty power wilts under daylight, so document everything, photos, dates, dollar amounts. Then pair those receipts with allies who remember what the paperwork used to say. Patterns don't just tell a story, they prove one. And public records are a citizen's flashlight in the attics where HOAs stash their secrets. In short, if a rule feels lopsided, follow the ink, follow the invoices, and let transparency do the heavy lifting. Sooner or later, the pastel pigeons circle back to roost on the sender's roof. So before you file tonight's revelations under interesting gossip, do me, and yourself, a favor. Walk your own block tomorrow, snap a few photos, and peek at the paper trail hiding in plain sight. When pastel pigeons start cooing from your mailbox, meet them with timestamps, city plats, and a neighbor or two who knows the smell of old ink. Documentation is daylight, and power built on shadows hates the sunrise. Stick around for the next chapter, because Trent Langford hasn't just lost his map, he's about to lose the very ground he's standing on, and the first cracks will appear where he least expects. Ready to see how quickly a paper kingdom can sink? Meet me in next part. The pastel pigeon that landed on my porch the following Monday was fatter than usual, weighed down by a certified envelope and an attitude. Inside, a $750 0 unauthorized aquatic storage fine, and a bold-faced warning that my Catalina would be towed in 48 hours if she wasn't gone. 48 hours? About the same window frontier sheriffs gave before a hanging, only this posse came armed with clipboards. Trent rounded out the love note with a PS in legalese, citing an emergency abatement clause that sounded impressive until you realized it referenced nothing in the bylaws. I laughed the way you do when the GPS spins you into a cornfield, humor and disbelief in equal parts, then walked straight to my printer. If Trent wanted a showdown, he was going to get the full PowerPoint, statutes, city ordinances, Coast Guard regs, all alphabetized and laminated. Paper may beat rock in grade school, but evidence beats ego every time. And if you think I was just printing for fun, hold that thought, because the next 48 hours turn into a masterclass on how to arm wrestle bureaucracy with its own paperwork. Step 1 in any good urban skirmish is assemble allies, so I speed-dialed Officer Jade Morales, the most level-headed cop in Lakeside County, an ex-Marine who knew the difference between a civic dispute and a real emergency. "Jade," I said, "there's a tow truck in my future. I'd like you in the present." She chuckled, asked for the time window, and penciled me in. Next call went to Sam Patel, City Waterways Chief, who'd already confirmed the lake was public property if a tow company tries to remove a vessel from municipal waters, Sam said. "They'll need permits, environmental clearance, and a signed order from my office. Spoiler, they don't have any of that. Music to my ears. I printed those requirements in 16-point Courier, taped them to a clipboard, and tucked a spare copy under my windshield wiper. Insurance, in case Trent tried reading comprehension on the fly. Then I spent the evening rehearsing a polite but immovable script. Operator, removing this boat without municipal authorization constitutes unlawful seizure. Here are the statutes. Please contact Officer Morales for clarification. If you think that sounds painfully formal, wait until you see what a diesel engine does to HOA bravado. 47 hours and 58 minutes after the warning, Trent operates on stopwatch villainy. The tow truck rolled down Shoreline Drive, diesel idle growling like a dragon hired by bureaucracy. The driver, burly guy in reflective overalls, killed the engine but left the intimidation rumbling. Trent strutted behind him, clipboard raised like a royal scepter. First thing I noticed, the tow rig bore an auto transport license, not a marine salvage permit. A technicality, sure, but technicalities are kryptonite to paper tyrants. I greeted the driver with the smile you save for TSA lines, handed him my laminated statutes, and recited the script word for word. Sir, per City Ordinance 2714 and Waterways Code 62, removal of a vessel from municipal waters without a city-issued marine permit constitutes unlawful seizure. Officer Jade Morales has been briefed and is en route. I'd like to avoid placing you in legal jeopardy. He scanned the sheet, eyebrows climbing like window shades. Trent barked, "Ignore him, he's stalling." The driver shook his head slowly. "Buddy, I don't get paid enough to star in a court case. Ever watch a balloon deflate? Imagine it in salmon-pink polo and loafers." That was Trent. And we were just getting started. Right on cue, Jade's cruiser glided in, lights off but authority blazing. She stepped out, cool as December, and introduced herself to the tow operator. "Mind if I see your marine permit?" she asked. He admitted he had none. Jade nodded, turned to Trent. "Mr. Langford, issuing tow orders on public waterways without proper authorization is outside HOA jurisdiction. I suggest you cancel this request." Trent's face shifted colors like a malfunctioning smart bulb. Rolex gold to traffic violation red, with pit stops at grapefruit pink and vein-popping crimson. He waved a stack of HOA forms that looked impressive until Jade pointed out they lacked city signatures. Sam Patel arrived next, armed with a folder thicker than my boat's hull manual. He confirmed, in front of everyone, that the lake was public and that any further interference would trigger fines on the HOA for environmental disruption. The tow driver muttered an apology, fired the diesel back up, and exited faster than free pizza in a break room. Trent was left holding paperwork that now read like blank pages. If you've ever wanted proof that calm data beats bluster, there it was, etched on his reddening cheeks. But if you think the humiliation ended at the curb, wait till you see the Skyview replay. Because while Trent fumed, my drone, registered, insured, and perfectly legal, hovered 100 feet overhead, filming the whole comedy in glorious 4K. After the tow truck vanished, I pivoted the camera toward Trent's private dock. There, basking in the afternoon sun, was his cigar-shaped speedboat, dock parked 24/7 like a bronze statue to irony. No environment hazard tags, no tow threat, just unapologetic fiberglass glimmering for the lens. I stitched that footage into a side-by-side reel. Tow truck confrontation on the left, Trent's rule-baking yacht on the right, then sent it to every homeowner and for good measure the local news desk. Neighbors who'd stayed silent began knocking, confiding their own pastel pigeon stories. Even Olivia Brooks forwarded the clip to state regulatory boards with a note, "Pattern of selective enforcement attached." Trent's paper kingdom wasn't just cracking. It was crumbling in high-definition slow motion. Stick around, because once hypocrisy goes viral, the cleanup crew gets real busy, and our dear president hasn't yet felt the aftershock of that diesel roar. If the tow fiasco taught me anything, it's that documentation turns volume into silence. Trent shouted, statutes whispered louder, his clipboard flailed, laminated codes stood still. The lesson? Gather your facts, rehearse your script, and let the rulebook do the heavy lifting, but don't flip the channel yet, Our HOA monarch is about to learn that when you weaponize bylaws for personal gain, you'd better check your own dog first. Next up, a surprise city hall hearing where every missing dollar demands an explanation and the pastel pigeons finally come home to roost. Curious? You should be. When the county engineer announced our only bridge had a cracked girder the size of a linebacker's smile, Willow Harbor Estates collectively gasped, then groaned. The repair would shut the span for 3 weeks, turning a 3-minute hop into a 45-minute detour that looped through 3 stop-sign towns and a stretch of asphalt potholier than Swiss cheese. You could feel morale sag like a trampoline, but frustration is just opportunity dressed in duct tape. So I borrowed a trick from Hurricane Logistics and offered Plan B, a lake taxi co-op. My Catalina could shuttle 10 commuters if we stacked schedules. Neighbors could add kayaks and Jean boats for feeder routes. The idea sailed further than a 4th of July bottle rocket. By dusk, we had a whiteboard sign-up, a smartphone scheduler, and Delia designing punch cards that read, "Float." Trent, overhearing the buzz, announced the concept was amateurish and promised a professional solution, which sounded ominous in the way only his promises do. You'll want to hear how that turned out. Trent's fix arrived the next morning in the form of a slick pontoon charter, complete with leather bucket seats, onboard espresso machine, and a driver wearing yacht club whites. He billed it as an executive commuter program, and because HOA funds are apparently monopoly money when your name is Langford, he tried to charge the entire subdivision for a service that would only ferry board members and their spouses. The invoice alone could have financed new textbooks for the local high school. Lucky for us, the Lakeside Gazette smelled a story sweeter than county fair funnel cake. Their exposé. Headline in 42-point font paraded Trent's luxury boat photos alongside a column of residents lugging groceries into kayaks. 12 hours later, the charter company backed out, citing reputational concerns and a sudden shortage of leather wipes. The pontoon returned to the marina. Trent's prestige took the longer route to dry dock, but humiliation is a dish that cools slowly, and he wasn't finished scheming. Trust me, you'll want a seat for the next wave. Meanwhile, our DIY lake taxi co-op lit up the shoreline like Christmas lights left up on purpose. We organized 3 morning crossings and 3 evening returns. Anyone with a paddle became honorary crew. Retired engineer Frank installed a sign-out board for seats with the efficiency of an air traffic controller. Nurse Kelly donated a crate of Coast Guard-approved life vests, and I instituted a refundable vest pool. $5 deposit, full refund when the vest comes back dry, and zipper intact. Mid-crossing, I'd give mini lessons. Keep your prop clear of silt, throttle up gradually to spare the minnows, and please, no single-use plastics on deck unless you plan to marry them. Kids listened, grown-ups pretended to, and within days we cut gasoline usage by 1/3. Commuters arrived at work smelling faintly of lake breeze instead of tailpipe exhaust. Eco-friendly travel never tasted so much like summer camp, and the sight of Trent pacing his dock without a ride was just extra cinnamon on the latte. Stay tuned, because cinnamon can burn if the heat keeps rising. Board members, suddenly transportation-less, swallowed their pride like expired yogurt and climbed aboard what Olivia jokingly called the Justice Barge. My Catalina outfitted with 2 canvas benches and a hand-lettered banner reading "Community First." To drive the point home, Delia stitched life vest patches that displayed a cheerful HOA logo encircled by the words, "All aboard" means all. Watching Trent's lieutenants trade loafers for neon vests was better than cable news. They rowed, they griped, they learned the hard way that water has no valet service. Each pull of the oar shaved a layer of entitlement, and by Thursday, even William, Trent's golf buddy, started waving to residents he'd never bothered greeting. Shared adversity can sand down egos quicker than any HOA citation. The lake was turning into both commute route and social equalizer. Yet I knew peace was temporary. Trent's silence reminded me of a pressure cooker with a broken gauge. Keep listening, the whistle's about to blow. Halfway through week 2, I spotted Trent talking to a sharp-suited lawyer on his porch, documents flapping like angry gulls. That evening, the rumor mill confirmed my hunch. He'd filed an emergency petition with City Hall to acquire the lake deed, arguing the HOA had provided historical stewardship and deserved statutory ownership rights. The petition dripped with revisionist history, crediting the HOA for decades of maintenance while ignoring that most of those checks went straight to his cousin's empty P.O. box. Worse, he labeled the co-op unsafe, attaching a blurry photo of kids queuing for kayaks as evidence of chaotic shoreline activity. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of calling the fire department to complain your neighbor's garden hose is wet. Council would hear the request in 10 days, and Trent was banking on low attendance and high apathy. I suspected he'd also trot out friendly politicians, still hoping for a piece of that phantom marina pie. So I drafted flyers, "Your lake, your voice, your Tuesday night," and enlisted every teenager with a TikTok thirst to spread the word. The best defense against a paper grab is a room full of taxpayers wielding pens. We'd soon see who outnumbers whom. Trust me, the next scene belongs on reality TV, and you've got a front row seat. Before that showdown, though, the lake delivered its own sermon on unity. One fog-heavy morning, the justice barge stalled mid-crossing. Spark plug hiccup. Without hesitation, board member Marcia and high schooler Diego grabbed paddles, turning our sailboat into a makeshift galley. Even Trent, standing on the dock in his overpriced windbreaker, shouted directions that were shockingly helpful. 10 minutes later, the barge touched shore, passengers cheering like they'd summited Everest. It dawned on everyone that the water didn't care about titles, bylaws, or who sat on which committee. It just required cooperation. The episode went viral on neighborhood feeds, adding torque to our upcoming City Hall turnout. People love a story where oars replace egos. Still, goodwill alone won't stop a determined bureaucrat with a stapler. We had proof. We had numbers. And I had drone footage queued for council screens. Whether Trent had anticipated that triple threat was another matter, and the suspense could slice through anchor rope. Hang tight. Next stop, public hearing, where the pastel pigeons meet the public record, and a single gavel strike may decide who truly owns the ripples under our hulls. Lesson time before we dock this segment. Adversity is the world's sneakiest team builder, and shared paddles make quick work of long detours. If a rule feels crooked, flip the script. Turn setbacks into showcases for community creativity, then season liberally with documentation and a dash of spectacle. We've learned fuel efficiency, life vest economics, and that nothing melts entitlement like a pair of blistered palms. But can good vibes outrow a legal power grab? Keep your vest zipped. The lake's still choppy, and Trent's emergency petition is moving through channels faster than gossip at a bake sale. Next part, we storm City Hall. Curious to see if pastel pigeons can fly indoors? Meet me there. If you've never seen a City Hall chamber hit maximum capacity, picture a Thanksgiving dining room after the turkey's gone and politics hits the table. Every seat filled, every wall lined too deep, fire marshal counting heads like a Vegas pit boss. That was the scene the night Trent Langford tried to snatch Willow Harbor Lake by waving a miracle deed he found in a legacy file. He strutted to the lectern in a charcoal suit sharp enough to slice paper and, with the theatrical flair of a televangelist, proclaimed the document conclusive proof that the lake had always belonged to the HOA. His ally Alderman Pierce, slick hair, silk tie, echoed every word like a karaoke machine short on originality. You could almost hear the pair clicking imaginary champagne flutes. But in the back row, Delia Harper clutched her 1975 floodplain plat like it was the Declaration of Independence in Braille, and I felt the tide turning before a single gavel struck. Stay tuned, paper can cut both ways. Pierce launched into a sermon on historical stewardship, reciting bullet points Trent had spoon-fed him: the HOA's countless lake cleanups, the community investment in shoreline aesthetics, the threat of property value Armageddon should my Catalina remain docked. His rhetoric dripped with nostalgia. I could almost taste the tinsel he threw on every sentence. Then he flashed the deed on the projector. Parchment hues, cursive loops, a notary stamp that glowed under the spotlights as if blessed. Gasps rippled. If drama had a dress code, Trent nailed it. But drama doesn't pay much attention to chemistry, and I'd already had the ink tested at a private lab. The lab said the ink was younger than my Netflix subscription, while the paper predated cable news. That mismatch sat in my briefcase like a coiled spring. When the council opened the floor for opposition, I stepped forward and felt the weight of 300 eyes, some hopeful, some terrified, settle on my shoulders. I reminded myself that evidence speaks cooler than adrenaline, then let the spring go. You'll want to hear the snap. I began with Dahlia's original plat, projecting it beside Trent's deed so the audience could play Spot the Difference. Notice the city seal? I asked, tapping the screen. That's the 1970 SM boss, phased out in '83. Now look at the deed. Newer seal, different eagle talons. If that deed's authentic, I'm the Prince of Nantucket. Laughter sluiced through the crowd, but Pierce objected, claiming my map was anecdotal. I countered with a forensic report. Volatile organic compound analysis showing the deed's ink contained pigments patented in 2016. Head swiveled back to Trent, whose complexion shifted from executive tan to boiled lobster red. I wasn't finished. Next slide. Bank transfer screenshots. HOA funds funneling to Harbor Shore Services, LLC, Carson Langford's ghost company, for aquatic upkeep. Dollar signs lined up like tombstones. I zoomed in on a payment dated 3 days before Trent's emergency petition. Maintenance so urgent, I quipped, it needed cash before council even knew there was a problem. The mayor leaned forward, brow knitting. The room's oxygen thinned. Curiosity had turned to suspicion, and suspicion was starving for dessert. Dessert arrived as a 3D rendering of a proposed luxury marina, complete with boutique slips, rooftop tiki bar, and profit distribution columns. 40% to Harbor Shore, 40% to Pierce's consulting shell, 20% to miscellaneous administrative partners. I clicked through panoramic mock-ups, yachts, valet kiosks, valet tips. Funny how a public lake becomes private revenue once the paperwork changes hands, I said, voice steady but sharp enough to crack ice. Is this the stewardship we're supposed to celebrate? Murmurs grew into open talk. Even council members whispered. Pierce stammered that the images were conceptual brainstorming, but the metadata stamp in the corner showed dates prior to the emergency bridge closure, proving the plan had been simmering long before any crisis. I closed the slide deck, returned to the mic, and offered the simplest call to action I know. Investigate the money, verify the ink, and ask why the only boats deemed hazardous belonged to people outside Trent's dinner rotation. The mayor's gavel hit wood like a starter pistol. You could sense gears shifting from spectacle to scrutiny, and Trent knew it too. Mayor Caldwell ordered an immediate fraud probe, city attorney to seize the deed for lab verification, finance department to audit HOA expenditures, state AG's office looped by conference call. Each instruction landed like a stone in Trent's shoe. His confident grin morphed into a thin line struggling to stay horizontal. Residents gasped, then applauded, a tidal clap that slapped against the chamber walls. Pierce tugged at his tie as if air had thickened. Delia winked at me from the aisle, and even Officer Morales, stationed in the back, gave a barely perceptible nod. In that electric moment, paperwork was mightier than powerhouse allies, and the council recognized a simple, inconvenient truth. Forged deeds are easier to print than to defend under fluorescent lights. But victory has a way of provoking the vanquished. When the mayor adjourned, Trent shoved past my elbow, eyes narrowed to razor slits. "This isn't over," he hissed, voice shaking like a lawnmower with one spark plug left. "You just ruined something bigger than you understand." He stormed out, entourage trailing, leaving the chamber buzzing with equal parts relief and foreboding. And that foreboding is exactly why you should stick around. Because the council's probe may have clipped Trent's wings, but wounded birds can still peck. And his next move will test whether community unity can outfly desperation. We just turned on the floodlights. Now we need to keep them burning until every corner is swept. In the meantime, remember tonight's lesson. Trust your eyes, trust the ink, and when someone shows up with last-minute paperwork, check the date of the pen before you salute the page. Up next, forensic audits, surprise resignations, and the question no one wants to ask aloud. What happens to a kingdom built on paper when the paper catches fire? Keep your life vest handy, the water's about to churn. Lesson: flashy documents and louder voices aren't proof. Verifiable ink and transparent ledgers are. When power waves history in your face, slow the parade and date stamp the confetti. Check seals, follow money trails, and let public testimony turn spotlights into sunlight. Communities win when ordinary neighbors treat paperwork like evidence, not decoration. One authentic plat can outmuscle a roomful of forged deeds. Keep your records close, your questions pointed, and remember, truth ages well, forgery doesn't. The forensic audit landed like a depth charge. $240,000, siphoned from HOA dues to Harbor Shore Services. Trent's cardboard cutout company that never owned a rake, much less a dredger. The report read like a crime novel annotated by CPAs, complete with falsified invoices, round-robin transfers, and the pièce de résistance, a Christmas morning wire to Trent's offshore boat maintenance fund, right after he'd bragged about buying a teak pool table. When the numbers flashed on the projector at our special meeting, you could hear collective jawbones thud against laminate. Delia Harper didn't gloat. She simply pushed her glasses up her nose and said, "Folks, that's your landscaping budget floating in Bermuda." Nothing rouses sleepy homeowners faster than realizing their petunia fund paid for somebody else's champagne fizz. And in that moment, the reform slate's victory became a foregone conclusion. Yet the election still had to play out, and the ballots would teach our neighborhood a civics lesson sweeter than any bake sale donut. Campaign month felt less like politics and more like group therapy. Every porch became a confessional where neighbors traded pastel pigeon horror stories. A 90-year-old fined for insufficient pumpkin symmetry, a single mom dinged for Disney-colored sidewalk chalk, my personal favorite, a citation against a scarecrow deemed too expressive. Delia's slate promised sunlight and service rather than search-and-destroy inspections, and people soaked it up like July tomatoes. We hosted Q&A bonfires, posted line journal budgets online, even live-streamed a debate from a paddleboard just to prove transparency could float. Meanwhile, Trent tried robocalls accusing Delia of dangerous radicalism, which landed about as well as a dad joke at a funeral once the audit's decimal points were public knowledge. Election night, you could have warmed your hands on the glow of smartphone returns. Delia's slate swept every seat by margins that made landslides look like polite nudges. I was drafted for treasurer on a write-in surge, but declined, telling folks I'd rather wrangle gulls than spreadsheets. They laughed and pinned me with a volunteer title instead. Harbor Steward, equal parts mascot, maintenance geek, and unofficial boat whisperer. The pay? Skip the line, blueberry pies from Delia. I've had worse compensation packages. The next morning, the county sheriff escorted Trent from his lakefront palace while TV crews fished for close-ups of his Rolex wrists in matching steel bracelets. The indictment listed fraud, wire larceny, and a garnish of conspiracy, a legal buffet so filling even Alderman Pierce lost his appetite and flipped for a plea deal before dessert. Trent's mansion, once guarded like Fort Knox, was seized under RICO and deeded to the subdivision as restitution. Watching movers haul out marble statues of mythical heroes felt poetic. Statuesque ego reduced to yard sale inventory. Delia convened a community vote on repurposing the place, and the result was unanimous. A library on the first floor, co-working loft upstairs, and a boat lending dock out back where Trent's cigar speedboat used to pose. We painted the portico sunrise orange, filled the foyer with donated paperbacks, and let the kids design a mural of rowboats linked like puzzle pieces spelling all aboard. If Carmo were a carp, it would have jumped right onto the dock and applauded. To keep the house lights bright and the ledgers cleaner, we baked transparency into the bylaws. Every invoice over $50 posts online. Monthly meetings streamed with instant replay. Subcommittees rotate so power can't stagnate like pond algae. We replace violation fines with improvement grants and created an ombuds corner where grievances land softly before they snowball. My harbor steward gig means 6 a.m. shoreline walks, checking for driftwood hazards and snapping water quality readings that auto-implode to our public dashboard. Saturday mornings I run row and grow workshops, 10 minutes on knot tying, 10 on recycling microplastics, donuts for anyone who brings an old receipt to shred for compost. Watching teenagers geek out over bilge pump maintenance instead of TikTok dances tells me we've redirected the current. Does governance by Google Sheet have hiccups? Sure, last week someone logged a request for emotional support flamingos, but at least the hiccups are transparent. The redemption arc reached full bloom the day we opened Harbor Commons. Kids sprinted through rooms that once housed Trent's taxidermy safari. Retirees sipped coffee beneath skylights he'd blacked out to protect artwork. Olivia Brooks donated coding laptops. Officer Jade Morales led a water safety seminar by the new dock. The inaugural boat lending queue wrapped around the koi pond, paddlers of every stripe eager to explore a lake that, for decades, had been treated like a velvet rope lounge. Standing on the porch rail, I told the ribbon-cutting crowd, "Guard your shoreline, guard your neighbor. Tyranny hates buoyancy." The phrase stuck. Someone printed it on library bookmarks. In a world clogged with screens, a borrowed canoe and a library card felt like solid resistance. And, because irony is best served twice, we framed Trent's forged deed, redacted and stamped "Avoid" above the checkout desk, a cautionary exhibit titled "Paper Anchors Sink Fast." Visitors pause before it, laugh, and then push through French doors to the real water outside. Nowadays, my Catalina sees gentler duty, sunset sails with grandkids who still think the rudder is magic. Last night, with the lake mirror calm and the commons lights twinkling behind us, little Nora asked how to tie a bowline. I showed her the rabbit through the hole trick Delia once taught me, and she tightened the knot with a grin big enough to catch moonlight. I realized then that victories aren't always courtroom gavels or front-page headlines. Sometimes they're small fingers mastering rope, proof that the next generation will know how to secure what matters. The lake, once a battleground, has become a classroom where humility paddles alongside humor. And, if you're tallying takeaways, try this. Build governance you can see through, trade fines for oars, and remember that community is just a collection of knots. You only need the right loops to hold it together. So let's keep the oars moving. Drop your own HOA horror story or the pettiest citation you've ever faced in the comments below. We'll crowdsource karma, swap strategies, and maybe inspire the next lakeside uprising. Until then, may your ropes stay true, your bylaws stay honest, and your pastel pigeons find kinder destinations. The water's open. Come sail with us. The night the first Harbor Commons book club meeting wrapped, I locked the boathouse and lingered on the dock. Just me, a lantern, and the hush of water that used to echo with threats. I caught my reflection beside the Catalina's hull and realized the man who once braced for pastel pigeons of doom now stands guard over open ledgers, open water, and open doors. The breeze smelled of cedar instead of litigation, and for the first time in months I felt entirely off-duty. If you'd told Deo Ethan that a forged deed, a leaky bridge, and a rowboat commute would reroute an HOA into a fellowship, he'd have laughed harder than a gull stealing French fries. Yet, here we are, proof that a single stubborn sailor can nudge a whole shoreline toward daylight. What's the moral of our floating soap opera? First, documentation beats domination. Photocopy, timestamp, ink test. Truth ages gracefully, lies fade like cheap sunscreen. Second, community is a muscle. Exercise it with potlucks and paddle shifts before someone else flexes it for you. Third, power's allergic to transparency. Hold meetings where sunlight lands and corruption scurries like roaches at last call. And finally, adversity is just civic glue waiting to dry. Shared oars turned former strangers into first-name allies faster than any icebreaker game. If that resonates, if you've ever squared off against a petty rule, a louder voice, or a deed that smelled fishier than Friday's catch, hit that like button so the algorithm knows good neighbors still exist. Drop your pettiest HOA encounter in the comments. Let's crowdsource both catharsis and strategy. And be sure to subscribe, because the lake may be calm tonight, but new ripples and new stories are always on the horizon, and you won't want to miss the next voyage. Until then, guard your shoreline, guard your neighbor, and remember, tyranny sinks, buoyancy wins. See you on the water.